My name is Ivo Dalder. I'm the president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. And it's wonderful to have you join us for this important program on global issues we can't ignore. Before we start the conversation, please note that the Council is an independent and nonpartisan membership organization. We're on the record, and the views expressed by individuals we host are their own, and they do not represent the institutional positions of the Chicago Council. We will discuss the world's most pressing problems over the next 45 minutes. After a brief 30 minutes or so of moderated discussion, we'll start incorporating your questions. So please turn your browsers to ccga.live, submit your questions, or vote for a question you like there, and I will put it to our panelists. Unfortunately, Tawakkal Karman, who was expected to join us this morning, is not able to join us live, but she did record a message which we will play immediately after the conclusion of the conversation. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Adil Najam is the Dean of the Pardee School of Global Studies at Boston University. He was a co-author of the third and fourth assessments of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was awarded the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize for advancing public understanding of climate change. And Muhammad Yunus is the chairman of Yunus Center at Grameen Bank, and he was awarded the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize jointly with Grameen Bank for their efforts to create economic and social development from below. Welcome to both of you this morning. Wonderful to have you. The last 6 months seems to have been a COVID 6 months. We will remember this as the coronavirus 6 months. It's been with us both in the United States and globally. More than 10 million people have been infected, at least those are the ones we've tested, and have been infected. 500,000 more people have already been killed by this disease. It is dominating almost everything that we are dealing with. And yet, there are many other issues. There are many global crises, from climate change to inequality to global poverty. Why is it that this crisis, Adil, and let me start with you, why is it that this crisis has been so dominant in the discussion in the last few months?
Thank you. This is for me, right?
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for this, and thank you for organizing this. In a way, I would say it is not that the other issues have gone away. It is simply that every issue is now a COVID issue. And the bigger the issue, the more it gets wrapped in COVID. And in some ways, it wraps itself over COVID. Right? So whether we are talking about climate change or poverty or human rights, what we see is that wherever we had cracks already, wherever we had vulnerabilities already, in comes the health crisis and those vulnerabilities compound. So in some ways, what is happening is exactly like the disease. Just like COVID seems to attack, if you will, or make vulnerable those with existing conditions the most, wherever we had existing conditions, those conditions become our vulnerability. And so you see within societies, the wounds that were there open up bigger. Those who are at the margins get more marginalized. Those who were vulnerable become more vulnerable. And in many ways, I think that's what we are seeing. The other thing I think in relation to what you're saying, we will also see is that it's not just the last 3 months or 6 months. And it's not going to be just the next 3 months or 6 months. Vaccine or not, those issues get transformed by this experience. So in some ways, this experience makes us, I hope, makes us realize how many vulnerabilities we had, how much of an unfinished agenda we had. And the cost of having that agenda unfinished is making this crisis worse.
Muhammad, how do you see it?
Yeah. I'll see it this way. Less than 100 days, the whole world was conquered. An invasion has taken place. And suddenly, we were not prepared for something like that. And the whole world collapsed, completely disintegrated, not knowing what to do. Suddenness of it, shock of it, is what is now we are going through. what happened. We have no clue how we are going to get out of it. We talk about vaccines and all that. But when do we reclaim this? After this invasion has taken place? Now, when do we reclaim the planet back to us? That's an issue that everybody is struggling to find out what is happening. It revealed, not only it made it, it revealed all the weaknesses in our society. It just came out on the surface. The big machine, the economic machine, giant of the machine, in less than 100 days, it just collapsed. It's put to sleep. It's in a coma right now. And we are now trying to find out how to wake it up, whether it's come up in the same size, same shape, same speed. Where do we grow? How to grow? Those are the kind of things. The big machine is put in sleep in less than 100 days. And that is the power. And then that revealed how unprepared we were, how disintegrated we were. The multilateralism completely collapsed out of this whole thing. This is the first time a common enemy is attacking the whole planet, whole human beings. But we didn't act in a kind of common way. We switched into tribalism in the face of a common enemy. We were trying to protect our own people, even hurting the other people. We didn't try to solve the problem together. Only global institution which we built to face this kind of situation was made under attack rather than supported. WHO, which is supposed to be our common front to address this, was the one seriously attacked by withdrawing funds and seriously attacked by ordering investigation, where we needed all the support possible, became kind of weakened as best as one could do. So that kind of situation that we found, instead of getting together, or just weakened whatever mechanism we had. We didn't use the United Nations for any purpose in this situation. We didn't have any Security Council meeting. What do we do? We didn't have a General Assembly meeting or whatever you needed to do. We didn't do that. We were busy trying to protect whatever it was and did it very sloppily. We didn't do a good job at that. We showed how weak the public health system was. We thought we had everything, our health systems are the richest country. Forget about the country like Bangladesh, where health system completely collapsed because there's no public health system. It was in name, it didn't act in any particular way. So this is again a revelation of how disorganized we were. Still we are not organized. Look at the vaccine. You hear announcement one after one, big company announcing all our initial production will go to the United States, already declared, Sanofi in France. And then another company is just announced their production will go to Europe. So what is happening to the rest of the world? You're talking about trying to save the whole planet. Again, it's a tribalism. We're trying to protect our own people. Even in the vaccine part, we didn't do a good job. So it's awakening up. What does it mean if we can fall apart like this, attacking each other in the face of common enemy, not only the global organization, the country attacking each other in this situation. So I would say it's a learning process for us, that how weak we are, how disorganized we are, despite all the 75 years of the United Nations and all the experiences that we have. The shock factor is the riding thing, the important thing, how quickly the whole system collapsed. We have no clue how to get it up again.
So this fragility, Mohammed, that you talk about of the system, of our internal healthcare capacity, of the economic globalization that has occurred, it strikes me that fragility and the weaknesses affect our capacity to deal with other global challenges beyond the pandemic.
Absolutely, yeah.
This
this was one chance. There's a common global enemy, just one enemy, in attacking the whole world, irrespective of who you are, how powerful you are under attack. Same as the poorest one as the richest country, doesn't matter. So this is a good time to show how globally we can get together and attack it and have a central command system and make decisions quickly and efficiently. We didn't do that. So that's the point I was making.
No, I think it's a very good point and a very valid point. So the question then becomes, how do you recapture this? Because we have global problems like climate change, that we need to, we're already well behind on the global action that we need. How do you recapture that moment? How do you, what does that do? First of all, what is the extent of the problem that we're facing? So let's go to the basics, and then we can talk about how do we recapture the spirit and need of international cooperation to do with that.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Not just recapture, but to rebuild, because frankly, let us also accept that it wasn't that we were in a wonderful place in January. It wasn't that in January we were about to solve climate change or we were about to eradicate poverty. So we were in a bad place, which is now showing. And if we are half smart as a species, then I hope we will learn from this to be in a stronger place after this. As Yunus was rightly saying, it's been a shock. It's been sudden, but it's not been surprising, right? Just like health experts had been saying again and again and again, guys, look here, epidemics happen, pandemics happen, prepare. And we were ignoring it. Exactly the same is true for climate change. Climate folks have been saying, something is coming, do something so that it doesn't come. It's not that we want it to come. And our attitude had been and has been, well, whatever it is will come at some other point, not in my term of office. Maybe not in my life, maybe some other generation. So we were kicking the ball down the road. And I hope one of the lessons from this pandemic is you can't mess with nature that way. Nature really doesn't care how far you have kicked the ball down. So in some ways, just like the pandemic, and I'm using sort of Bill McKibben's words here, but just like the pandemic has shown us that you can't mess with biology. Once the pathogen says 6 feet, guys, you have to be 6 feet, because it's not going to listen to who you are and where you are. It's going to act the way it does. Well, physics and chemistry work exactly the same way. In terms of climate, what we've thrown out is not going to go away because the time is inconvenient for us. Now, there is a good side to the lessons too. The good side, again, as Yunus was saying, remember how easy it was to just shut down traffic? Things that we had thought were impossible. If I had said to you 6 months ago, 3 months ago, why don't we just stop traffic in Chicago or reduce it to 10%, or in Dhaka or in Boston? I would have been laughed at. And yet, the pathogen forced us, again, to use that metaphor, it invaded us and it forced us to do things that we thought were impossible. I hope the lesson is that it shouldn't take a pathogen. It shouldn't take COVID to do what is right. In some ways, we have seen a fall in global emissions like we have never seen before. The terrible lesson I hope doesn't happen would be, well, it takes a pandemic. That's how big it is, therefore I will not do nothing. On the other hand, I hope the lesson could be that, well, maybe with a few smart changes, we can make some of these gains permanent in ways that doesn't require a pandemic to happen. So in a way, if the dominant voice words of today are written by COVID, in the background, there is this constant tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock of a whole bunch of other clocks ticking. A major one of which is climate change. In many ways, I hope this is a moment of reflection for those who might not have thought of what a climate changed world looks like. Right? A climate changed world looks like not just sort of, what happens to your weather in your home. It looks like what happens to the farmer in terms of their yield. It looks like what happens to the shrimp farmer's livelihood. So just like the pathogen reminded us that there are a whole host of people whose lives we had never thought of, people who work in grocery stores, people who work in barber shops. The same way, climate, I hope we are now thinking, okay, what happens if climate changes? What happens to people's livelihoods? What happens to institutions? What happens to borders? Right? And same with a whole host of other issues. So I think in that sense, it is a moment of inflection and choice. And it is a moment, like every moment in history, is of choosing what we learn from this moment. Will we learn how to be scared and lock ourselves up and build walls? That could very well be the lesson of COVID. Or will we learn the lesson that Yunusaf is saying rightly that we haven't learned, that here is a global moment, here is a crisis that is truly, truly, truly global, just like climate changes, that requires truly, truly, truly global solutions. And we have failed to provide them.
So I want to come back to you in a minute on the question of how do you generate the action necessary and what actions particularly are necessary to now anticipate, to move, to use this moment. And I'll come back to you. But before that, Mohammed Yunus, I want to come back to you on the question of how the issues that you have dealt with for your entire life, the issues of poverty, are now sort of re-emerge, seen more clearly by the crisis, and whether the international community might be at this pivot point to say, you know what, the reality is that if a poor person anywhere is going to have an impact on my capacity to thrive in the way that the pandemic is doing. Have we seen as the Germans would say, a Gestalt shift, this change a way of thinking about poverty because of this?
Yeah, it's telling that it has revealed the weaknesses in our societies everywhere, and one of them is poverty. We knew how poor people live, how they are part of our life, but we don't notice them because they are serving us, they are taking care of us, they are doing manual work and all kinds of work with a petty amount of return for themselves. But suddenly, Corona crisis has stopped everything. And their income gone, their service gone, they are locked up in their places, they don't know what to do. After a few days, they find out they cannot survive anymore, their savings are off. And in an Indian situation, in the Bangladeshi situation, we saw millions of these people coming out of the cities because they have no place for them anymore, going to the highway, started heading for home, 1,000 miles away, on foot. It's a terrible situation to look at. We didn't realize that all those people lived in these cities. We knew it, but never understood it. Suddenly, these little creators started oozing out from the cities, coming out and be visible. Suddenly it made visible, and everybody is shocked. What do you do with this? So that kind of situation, that they question the whole idea, why people have to come 1,000 miles away to make a living for survival. Why economic couldn't find a way to make a situation where they can have their livelihood, survival livelihood, in the places where they're born. What is the problem? Why do you have to go away with leaving your families, your children, and so on and so on? So these are the questions now coming out. And the world that before the Corona crisis are the one who had bred this whole situation that we're talking about right now. Now we are trying to, even planning to go back. I said, what kind of world that is that we want to go back to? That 6 months away that we are talking about. Is it a world that we want to go back to? I said, it's suicidal. Why do we want to go back? That's the basic question. No going back is the decision right now. No going back. We don't want to go back from the frying pan to the fire. If you consider coronavirus is a frying pan, you want to go back to the fire? Adil and all the scientists have shown there's only a couple of decades left for survival, or 3 decades survival. 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius, all marked. Countdown has begun. So coronavirus has done us a great favor, making us aware that this is the path you are taking, this is where the train was going, and coronavirus have been kind, stop the train. We had no capacity to stop the train because we are heading for the disaster. With the global warming, we're heading for it. We are going ahead with poverty and wealth concentration. in the US election, Bernie Sanders repeatedly explaining how all the wealth is concentrated in few hands. What happens to the rest of the world? What happens to the rest of the country? All the wealth of the world is in few hands, completely located in a few countries. And the rest of the world doesn't have them. Less than 1% of the 99% of the population of the entire world. You call it a system, and this is what we're going to go back to. And you talk about poverty. Poverty doesn't come in isolation. Poverty is a concrete thing. So if you have a system which picks up all the wealth and sends up to the top, poverty, basic fundamentals, part of that system. It's not an isolated thing that you can deal with separately and so on. So this, first of all, the decision, we talk about poverty. We don't want to go back to that world. And this is a suicide. So we have to build a new world. And that's the world where there'll be no poverty, there'll be no global warming. It can be done. For simple reason, there is no global warming right now. Whether it's air is clean, and all the machinery which is creating the global warming is stopped. So should you restart that engine to start the global warming? The machine that we build is the wrong machine. That's a basic simple thing. We have to design a new machine which will not create global warming, which will not create wealth concentration, will not create unemployment, massive unemployment through artificial intelligence and all that, which are sort of jumping around to make it happen in a few years of time. So that is the basic thing right now in the Corona crisis. Corona crisis is not a lesson. We are talking about a lesson. It's not a lesson. It's a great opportunity of a century for the whole human race. That whether you want to survive on this planet or you want to create a world that you deserve, you can do that. And best thing to do is to undo the system that works and create the system which works in a way all these things will not exist there. And this is the chance to do that, because the train has stopped, as I said, and we are getting out of the train. Oh my God, we couldn't stop the train, but Corona has stopped us. We are relieved, we are safe. Now, do we go back to the train again? Or we say, no, that train is abandoned. We build a new track, a new train, go to a new direction. That's the challenge for all of us. If you miss that point, we miss our life. We miss the whole opportunity of our lifetime for the entire planet.
That's a nice metaphor. And before I'll come back on the climate change issue, but before I do that, to our viewers and listeners, if you want to join the conversation, we'll take your questions. If you go to ccga.live, type in your question or vote on one that's already there, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. The train is stopped on climate change. Perhaps some things are still changing because of course, the past has a to project to the future. But let's take the metaphor because I like it. What do we do now? What is the opportunity, and how do we marshal the means necessary to say we need to go in a fundamentally different direction? One of the questions, a lot of money is being pumped in by rich governments into the economy, into businesses, etc. Is this an opportunity to say we need a new train? In fact, we don't need a train. We need to go back and have a new modes of transportation. What is it that we can do to really marshal the opportunity on the climate change side? John.
Thank you. You're right. On climate, we no longer need a tutorial on what climate change is. Your viewers know it. You know it. I know it. We know what to do, right? The IPCC has been telling us. The Paris Agreement has been telling us. We know what to do. We had been saying, well, we know what to do, but it's too expensive. We've been saying, we know what to do, but it's too inconvenient. And if you're going to catch the new train that UNICEF created for us, then you have to question yourself on inconvenience and cost and ask, is it really too expensive to give your kids a future that has existence in it? So let me do a thought experiment. Let's make this train, a time machine. And let me say to you, if you could take a train back 4 months ago, and I said to you, give me $100 billion, or give me $1 trillion, and I will make sure COVID doesn't happen. Would Mr. Trump take the deal? I think he would, because he's had to spend much more, right? So if knowing what we know now, you could go back 4 months and someone said, give me $1 trillion and this won't happen, I think we would all have taken that deal. Even poor countries would have figured out whatever they needed to chip into that. In the same way, on climate change, the experts and people who have really spent serious thought on this are saying, we know many of these right things. Many of these right things not only are not that expensive, they may even have benefits. Right? There is a benefit to not being stuck in traffic every morning in Chicago. There is a benefit in finding time to spend with your family. And so I think what needs to be done is to reassess those assumptions, and most importantly, to reassess this assumption that we have time, as if we will choose the time when climate change comes, and before that we will act. So if we do that, then it does become the opportunity that Yunus Saab is talking about. If we don't take the time to reconsider those assumptions, then it remains a crisis and it expands every other crisis. The other lesson that I think climate change teaches us is how everything is connected. How quickly have we all realized that what started from as a pathogen, as a disease, has so quickly transformed into an equity question, into a poverty question, into an employment question, into an economy question, into a society question, into a sociology question. And I hope the lesson we learn again is climate change is exactly like that. The opportunity, if there is one, is being able to learn the lesson. I have no doubt that we as a species are more knowledgeable and we have the knowledge to solve the problems that we have. What I doubt is whether we have the wisdom to act in time. And if you're doing anything sitting at home, watching this on Zoom, let us take a moment to think about those questions that we brushed aside because climate seemed something too far away. The poor seemed some people too distant. And to realize that these things become very close to our existence very quickly when crisis hits.
Let me stay for you and press you on it. I think you've made the case how to, in an intellectual way, how to think about the need to use the crisis and the pandemic and the understanding that if we can act now, we can at much less cost and actually do something that will have a huge impact down the road. How do you, I guess, put it this way, who is making that case in a politically salient way, not just in the United States, but globally? Is there anyone who is making this case? The European Union is pumping $750 billion into their economies and favoring green over brown to some extent. Where is the actual policy sense coming from on climate change today that indicates that your argument is one that people understand? Or
I don't think it's being made. Unfortunately, even in Europe, I don't think it's certainly not being made in the US. And developing countries simply can't afford to make the case. And even in Europe, I don't think it's being made by the intensity that it can. So at the easiest level to make the case is in all the stimulus packages, right? So money is going to be pumped in, is being pumped in stimulus in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in the US, in Europe. Can we make those investments green? And frankly, at this point, we are certainly not to the extent we can. I mean, there is tokenism here or there, but not in a serious fashion. So that's one very real place where you can make it. If you're going to pump things into the economy, make sure that that takes the economy in a greener, less carbon intensive direction. Unfortunately, this death of globalism, this death of multilateralism that was mentioned earlier is too deep, right? Here we have the biggest global crisis of our lifetime. And what is missing in action? Any multilateralism whatsoever. Any multilateral. Do you see any multilateralism? What was the first thing we did? Build walls. And not just the US. In Europe, Germany says to Italy, I can't share my masks with you at the beginning of this. So I hope that shock helps us learn the mistakes we've made. But let me be hopeful to your question. Where can it be made? I think it can be made in individual action. Because a lot of us individually have learned the lesson that things we thought were very, very difficult turned out not to be that difficult actually. Now the question is, can we make those private individual decisions, right? The decisions on how to travel, how much to use my car, how to heat my home, what to do with my time. In some ways, here is an experiment that allowed us to do things that we thought were just impossible. And some of them are painful, but a lot of them are not. A lot of them are not. Find me someone in Chicago, I can't find them in Boston, who enjoys sitting in a traffic jam, going to work, taking an hour and a half for 5 miles.
Let me add a little bit to what Adil has said. About,
you do, yeah. and add to that, but also go back to the train has stopped. What is, when it gets to the issue of poverty, we have a systemic problem. How do we change the direction in the way that you think, and I think all of us would think is?
Yeah, just first to add what Adil said. We all know how to address the global warming. It's not an unknown phenomenon. It's a known, and we can even identify who is contributing how much to global warming. So these are all lists, understood, accepted. It's not unknown. So if you want to go in a new direction, again, the question that you raised, first of all, those who are making the world toxic, we don't let them come to the new world, because they are the one who is guilty of making this global warming. So that decision has to be made. In this new world that we'll start the engine, we build a new engine. In that new engine, these will not be included, whoever is contributing to the global warming. That one decision you have to take. Either you move from the frying pan to the fire, as I said, that's your choice. You want to commit suicide, you are welcome. But if you want to save your life for the next generation and generations for future, you have to turn around, get away from all those toxic businesses that you have, which contributed to that. It's not coming from somewhere else. It's coming from the businesses. So we identify the businesses. These businesses are not allowed in the new world. That's the decision. When I say no going back, means they are not going with us. We go to where, that's the direction. You ask for the direction, that's the direction we have to go. Because we have listed them, we know how much is it. The number one, who is number one, who is number two, who is number three, they are not coming with us. That decision is a hard decision, because this is the, as I said, this is we have to make outrageous decisions right now. It's not a simple little decision, okay. And you talk about the finance, you talk about the what is the resources coming, Adil has made it very clear. This is all the trillions of dollars already allocated for the rebuilding, quote unquote, to go back. Why you're wasting your money for the committing suicide, all those trillions of dollars? Why didn't you invest it to create a new world, so that you can move from the industries which are creating all this problem to move into something different, which will be helping the building of the new world? That's the decision. It's a decision that we have to make right now, because Corona thing will be over. People will be so busy going to the barbershop, going to the restaurants, and so on, forget as if all is over. All is not over. We're just starting in the wrong direction again. So we have to find a way how to get it done. And one is the industries which are contributing to the global warming. Then you talk about the poverty. Poverty is also part of the contribution of the system that we built. And most guilty institution that we have to fix to go into the right direction is change the financial institution. Financial institution is the institution which is creating the global wealth concentration. So because they are the one who is supporting, they are providing all the resources, all the finances to people who already have lots of money, not paying any attention whatsoever to the bottom half of the entire human population on this planet. So we have to redesign the financial system. We used to say that it cannot be done. In our work, we have shown that it can be done. It could be done in a very business-like way, in a very sustainable way, and it works without the principles of the banking that you have been pushing us to create, so that the poor people cannot come near us. It's a collateral. So we abandoned the whole idea of collateral. So we built trust. So that's why we continue to work with what is became known as microcredit. Now it works in the United States. It used to be in Bangladesh, globally around, but very strongly now it's in the United States and working there in 14 cities, addressing the poorest women in the areas where they live. Then exactly the same result what we have in Bangladesh. So why don't we create these institutions which is available to the people at the bottom, and we dismiss these people at the bottom by putting a name called informal sector. I said, what a shame. You call it an informal sector. There's the most precious sector in the whole society because they are the micro-entrepreneur sector. They take care of themselves. They do little business here, little business there. And they're more than half working workforce of any country. But we ignore them, calling them informal sector. I said, by releveling them, just recognize their work. If you call them micro-entrepreneur sector, suddenly you become aware this is the base of the entrepreneurial pyramid of the society. You have on the $1 trillion people at the top, and you have the $1,000 people on the bottom, but they're entrepreneurs. They're doing things on their own way. But no institutions will support it. So we have to build an institution to support the bottom 50% of the people, financial institutions particularly. And most of these institutions will be designed as what we call social business, meaning business to solve the problem of the people rather than make money for themselves. That's the guilty party, profit maximization. It's blinded us completely. So we are running after the profit maximization, getting everything else. So while you do the profit maximization, we introduce a new kind of business to solve problem without any intention of making any profit. That idea of social business is spreading. Grameen Bank microcredit started as a social business. There was no intention of making money for anybody. This is just to solve the problem. That's how microcredit is all about. It's designed as a social business, and it can now spread into other sectors of businesses. In healthcare, as I said, is falling apart. Now you can build a whole healthcare system as a social business. You have a commercial healthcare system where you make money by providing healthcare. There is charity healthcare system. You dish out healthcare as a free gift. And in between comes the social business healthcare. You're not doing it as a charity. You're not doing it for profit maximization. You recover your cost, but nobody wants to make money out of it. So suddenly it becomes a sustainable entity and so on. So many of these institutions can be redesigned. Healthcare system can be redesigned completely. Financial system can be redesigned completely. And then move into the direction that you want to go. Finance is not the problem. It's the idea. All thinking, all ideas will always take you to the old road, leading to the old destination of destruction. If you want to go a new destination, you have to build new roads. This is the chance, this is the time to build new ideas and new roads to go to the new world.
So one of the questions that is, I think, relevant that is being asked is the question of debt, and there's a massive debt that has been built up, in part as a result to address with the pandemic. How should we deal with that debt? And Mohammed Yunus, I think I've already sort of answered that question, but let me be specific. How do we deal with the old system, and what part of that old system do we recognize in the new system, or do we say, no, we need a fundamental, we need to go in a completely different direction? We don't do trades anymore.
Yes, I was giving the example of the global warming. I said we can make the list of all industries according to the contribution in the global warming, and find out which is the worst and which is less worse, and gradually. And there are some very minor contribution. So we start with people who are industries which are not contributing or little contribution. But definitely we cut the top, because if you cut the top, 80% of the problem is solved. So we can gradually help the other 20% which is left. And the financial sector is the same way. Financial sector it's all money-making proposition in the financial sector. So how do you design the financial sector so that it can help the people, so that they don't run into the problem of poverty and helplessness and walking 1,000 miles to get back to the people? And how to design the urban versus rural economy. Today, rural economy is in economics is designed and conceived as some kind of a labor-producing factories. You produce labor for the cities, and they go to the cities for work, because the rural economy doesn't have anything. If you don't have the accommodation in the nearest city, you have to go to a distant city and ignore distant city because you have no place for the rural, any opportunity in your economy in the rural area because economics doesn't recognize the rural economy, recognizes only the urban economy. I said, days and time has changed now. Technology has changed, infrastructure has changed, transportation has changed, communication has changed. A rural part of the world is as good as the urban world, doesn't matter. You can work anywhere. You can set up your industry, you can set up your shop, you can set up a business anywhere you want. Why do we have to go to the city to do that? In such a funny situation, you send all your people to work in the urban area so that they can have a job there because the rural doesn't have it. Rural produces all the agricultural produce. So all the agricultural produce is transported to the cities. The rural people come, rural goods come in the process. Why can't they do it in their home? Why do they have to come to the city to do that? You have your produce, you have your people, do it there. Build rural economy as a separate economy, independent, autonomous economy, dealing with everybody else. They have the people, they have the resources, and build it up. You create institutions for the rural areas. Today, only the urban institutions are reluctantly extending their services to the rural area. Why should they be reluctantly doing that? Many of them never had that extension. Political pressure, pressure from people in the villages, finally some trickling of the services coming from the urban areas. Why don't you design institutions just for the rural areas? Don't have to do anything with the urban area so that you build economy. The principle would be, basic principle would be, people will have their own livelihood right where they are born. That's the basic principle. And if they want to grow further than that, that's up to option because you build your own economy. So this is the kind of redesigning, reconceptualization of the things. Why should people have to go to risk their life to make a living for themselves? When coronavirus came, one of the things became very familiar: life versus livelihood. Is this a kind of a debate? You discuss life versus livelihood. Life is something basic thing. You cannot trade off with anything. Livelihood has to be supported with the life. There is no question about trading life with the livelihood. Life became a tradable subject in this negotiation of this. So I said that's a very wrong concept, way of looking at things. So life remains. We have to build the livelihood so that life is supported. That's the kind of structure that we have to build. There are two issues in the coronavirus. One is the current immediate thing that you do, but this is a very good chance, very good opportunity to think about the long-term way, what you're going to do. That's what the train issue that came, what train we take, where do we go? It's very important decision to take, and so that we can make decisions which will be wise decision, not a decision to commit suicide.
Let me give, because we have only a couple of minutes left, Adil Najam, a concluding thought. I think we get fundamentally which train we now need to take when it comes to the issue of poverty and livelihood as part of being alive. I think Muhammad Yunus has laid that out brilliant. On the issue of climate change, how do we make sure that we don't miss the opportunity that is here, and what happens if we do miss it?
So what happens if we do miss them is it hits the fan in big time. Big time. If you thought that coronavirus was inconvenient, wait for climate change. Actually, don't wait for climate change. Please do something so that it doesn't happen. But I think in terms of things to do, there are things to do. Right? In some ways, I hope we realize from this that this is a long-term process. This is not a moment that we just lock ourselves up into our house and then we open the doors and come out and all is well. The question is not whether we open or close. The question is, can we make our environment safe? Right? Can we make our work environment safe? Can we make our cities safe? Can we make our country safe? By the same token, climate is part of that question, because can we make our planet safe? And I'll very briefly go back to your debt question, right? Because there will be problems, and debt is going to be one of the biggest ones at the individual level, at the national level, right? Because our ability to raise money will be lowered because of the stoppage. And people will be constrained, so we will need to help them. Both of these are going to make countries it will require countries to put more money into the economy. Where is that money going to come from? Now, in other crises, you looked at other parts of the world. You said, okay, there's a crisis, a financial crisis in Latin America. Maybe the US will help me or Europe will help me. In this case, everyone is going to be facing the same problem, right? That's what's going to compound the debt problem. The debt problem is also going to be compounded because you are nearly already at 0% interest rate, right? So you can't play much more with interest rate. Where is the light in this? The light in this is that I think we need to rethink at least national debt. And that means IMF and the international institutions to whom countries owe money. If we get out of this and start squeezing developing countries more on those debt repayments, we will force them to make the wrong decisions. On the other hand, we can take the same collateral and say, well, instead of paying back us dollar, why don't you invest in the right things for a sustainable future that's going to make the world also better? Whether it is with poverty and livelihoods, whether it is with climate. So in some ways, if we redirect towards a greener economy, where we do make the investments, but we make the investment not in a coal plant, but in sustainable urban transport, where we make the investment not what is the fastest way to get jobs back, but what is the best way to make jobs sustainable. And that is the type of opportunity. One line, Eva, if I might, there are very few opportunities in history where actual big change in the economy can be made. In some ways, COVID has forced that opportunity on it. Now, whether we take it or not is on us.
I think that's a remarkably salient way to end this really wonderful conversation. Unfortunately, it's all the time we have. We've only scratched the surface of two very difficult issues, but I want to thank you, Adil Najam, and Muhammad Yunus for being with us in this conversation. Don't go away if you are still with us. Please stay tuned. We have a pre-recorded remarks on human rights and how they are today's most pressing global challenges by Tawakkol Karmans, who was the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, who unfortunately was unable to join this conversation. And I'm sure it would have enlivened it even more. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, and for all of you, please stay tuned. A recording will be available on our website and on our YouTube and social media platforms. And with that, thank you so much. And here is the video.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. First of all, I am so happy to be with you in this very important event organized by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Also, I am so glad to participate with my brothers, Dr. Muhammad Yunus and Dr. Adil Najam. Actually, the title of this event, Global Issues That We Cannot Ignore, is indicative of the nature of the issues we are meeting around, and it's indicative of the state of these issues in today's world. I believe that one of the main global issues, or not one of them, the main global issues that we shouldn't ignore is human rights issues. I know that Dr. Muhammad and Dr. Adil will cover other issues. I will focus on human rights issues. Today, the humanity is suffering from the decline in interests in human rights issues worldwide. And it's no longer, unfortunately, it's no longer taking the lead. At the beginning of this 21st century, the expectation heralded the growth of emerging democracies and the commitment of states to respect and safeguard human rights. But unfortunately, in the past years, the world went in another direction, in which democracy retreated as a role model to be followed in the whole world. Also, the rise of racism, its discourse and forces in the heart of the free world in America and European countries, as well as the re-emergence of wars and international conflicts that pursue interests, influence, and support of allies among regimes and militias. So, in the face of this global regression, we should be together to confirm our struggle as a global civil society, as a global movement, uh, as a global human rights defenders, activists, as a human being in a world that is experiencing, a decline in the universal principle and values, which is freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, justice. So we should unite, we should work together, we should confirm our struggle, we should stress our struggle for, for stopping this deterioration in human rights issues. What's happening now, the protests, the Black Lives Matters and the protests, the great movement in the United States remind us of our great peaceful struggle against tyranny, corruption, and failure. It reminds us of our great sacrifices in Arab Spring for our dreams, for freedom, for equality, justice, democracy, and rule of law. Yemen and Arab Spring countries have known in the past 9 years an ugly kind of war, of chaos, of counter-revolutions led by authoritarian regimes in the region, Saudi, Emirates, and Iran. They use the war, conflict, chaos, terrorism, militia, military coup, and so on as a revenge from our simple calls, for the simple dreams of people in the region for freedom, justice, and democracy. They tried to block our horizon with blood and death, but the will to freedom is stronger than death and destruction. Future is for us, for the people, not for the tyrants and militias. Again, so when we see the protesters in the streets of United States, these protests reaffirm that the American people are alive and will be the real leader of the free world and defender of civil rights, not only in the United States of America, but everywhere in the world. And the American administration will not be able to restrain American people or prevent them from this historic, exceptional rule. Now there is an American Spring started with the birth of the civil movement in America, and it's continuing. Civil rights and freedoms in the world suffer from a real setback. There are many tyrants and global powers back then who not only oppress their people, but their influence extends to sponsor despotism everywhere. Unfortunately, it seemed that the U.S. administration, especially under Trump administration, had abandoned its mandate and role in combating these tyrants and the powers that back them. So, but these protests provide us a reassuring global message to the free people of the world and activists and civil rights advocates. America, on the official level, is no longer considering human rights as it is, compass that guide its global relations. It's appeasing the tyrant and collide with them often. Official America has not done and will not do anything genuine and serious to advocate the struggles for freedom, nor did it support the victims of the of tyrannical regimes. It has done nothing to make the world freer while global powers support the dictators to make the world more, authoritarian. This is very, very, very unfortunate. But again, this is not Americans' position. Its position and mission, are, to be a leader of the free world and leader of freedom in the world. And it should be, and it will be. And this is what I believe, because when I see these huge movements, huge demonstrations for asking and calling for equality, those great youth movements will make the destiny of America and the destiny of the world is better. The future will be better under their leadership, and they will lead the world one day. So I say to American protesters, you are on the right side of history. You are the spirit of America. You are the spirit of humanity and its bright face. You are not alone. We are not alone. You are God's loved one, and blessed be you. And here, finally, I want to remind you again that it is important to continue the global networking, the global work, the global, coordination with each other between the human rights organizations, peaceful movements, activists, media, and the local and international civil society organizations. Our harsh experiences increase our belief in equality, democracy, justice, human rights, its inevitability, and the impossibility of living without them. Thank you so much.